Good morning, everyone. It is Sunday, July 19, 2020. This is Inside Story, and I'm Matt O'Donnell. Welcome. The conversation on race inequality has shifted, and so we here at Inside Story have made it a point to bring this conversation to you as often as possible. There are still some voices you may not have heard. Maybe their words, their feelings, their demands would have come across as angry or combative or dangerous. That is until many of our perspectives have changed. A recent poll from the Pew Research Center found that 67% of adults support the Black Lives Matter movement. 60% of whites did in the same poll. Pew also found 70% of Americans have had conversations about race in the past month. We are about to have a conversation about race right now on Inside Story. Joining us is Michael Coard, who has practiced criminal law in Philadelphia for several decades, who has almost exclusively represented black men who have been charged with heinous crimes like murder. He is also an activist, journalist, radio host, and adjunct professor of African Studies. Michael, thanks for joining us on Inside Story.
Hey, Matt, thanks for having me. I certainly appreciate it.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well, fighting the good fights, winning most of them.
Before we get into our discussion on race relations, I want you to tell us what it's been like during the pandemic working in the criminal justice system. As you know, all jury trials have been canceled in the city through September 8th. What is this backlog of cases doing to the justice system?
It's interesting because I have mixed emotions. On the one hand, I want to get into court so that I can do what I do on behalf of people who are presumed innocent. On the other hand, I want to make sure that everybody is safe and healthy. So as an attorney, I'm looking at the Fifth Amendment in terms of defendants' rights. I'm looking at the Sixth Amendment, but then I'm saying that, hey, if we rush this thing too quickly, then not only will my client get sick and possibly die, I'll get sick and possibly die, jurors will get sick and possibly die, and judges. So we're moving slowly, but it's like a necessary evil. We have to move slowly. We only have two options. We do what we're doing now to try to dot every I and cross every T, or we forget about all that and just rush back into the courtrooms like there's not a problem. That would be a foolish move. So yes, there's a backlog, but there's nothing we can do about it.
As a comparison, New York City is in the same situation. Courts are closed. When do you personally anticipate the court system will be fully operational again?
Great question, Matt. The answer is I've been meeting with attorneys, I've been meeting with judges, I've been meeting with court staff, and many of the meetings have been confidential, so I can't disclose too much, but I can say that what we're doing is to avoid reinventing the wheel. We're looking around the country. We're looking around the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We're looking to see what other court systems have done, and we're trying to replicate that. But we're moving cautiously and slowly because we have to. I can answer your question directly by saying this, Matt. It seems at this point we're saying that for sure there won't even be any consideration about a jury trial until possibly September. And that's just a consideration, because how are we going to do this? Anybody who's been at the Stout Justice Center, which used to be called the Criminal Justice Center, you can see how small many of those courtrooms are. And you can see how cramped the jury box is. So what are we going to do? Force people to sit on top of each other in a jury? Or are we going to do what some jurisdictions have done and put the jurors in the spectator section so that we can have social distancing? But then when we do that, we violate the Constitution in terms of a public trial. So it's a real dilemma all around, but I got to give credit. I'm usually yelling and screaming at the court system, but at this point, I have to concede that they're literally doing the best they can do.
Speaking of yelling and screaming, you were a recent guest on the True Philadelphia podcast. We didn't do any screaming on that. You can download or stream it on YouTube, Google, or Apple Podcasts. In leading our discussion, I mentioned that you brand yourself on Twitter as the angriest black man in America, and how many considered you a radical maybe last year, but this year they don't see you that way in terms of your demands for racial equality, for all of us to acknowledge our country's dark history with its treatment of blacks. More and more people are talking about these ideas you've been talking about all these years, maybe sharing your ideas too. What does that mean to you?
It means that America is moving forward, not because it's made any substantive changes, but it's moving forward because it's finally listening. It's sad that white America had to see a black man strangled by the knee of a police officer for almost 9 minutes to realize what we've been saying for a long time. I'm not just talking about me here in 2020 and 2010 and year 2000. I'm talking about Malcolm X. I'm talking about Dr. King. I'm going back to slavery. So what we're saying now, what I'm saying now, is what the abolitionists said beginning in 1619. And it's really disheartening that it took America 401 years from 1619 to begin to listen. But I'm not complaining that much right now. Sometimes better late than never. I wish it had been much earlier, but the fact that we're beginning to talk about it is important. And very quickly, Matt, one of the things I really want to say is this. Even though I'm kind of optimistic about America beginning to listen, I'm at the same time a little disappointed that we have to debate the question of Black Lives Matter, because the response by many is, well, all lives matter. The fact that we're debating that, we're not saying Black lives are supreme. We're not even saying Black lives are superior. We're simply saying Black lives matter. Think about that. How do you debate the question that a human being's life matters? But that's where we are in America in 2010. But at least it seems that we're beginning a dialogue.
There is sheer data that says a typical white family's wealth in America is nearly 10 times greater than a black family's wealth. We know that as a whole, young black children have unequal access to good education. Black people are being disproportionately impacted by the coronavirus as we speak. And Michael, some would say, well, you know what? Maybe it's their fault. Maybe it's the choices that they make. Maybe it's their own behavior. What would your response be?
And when people say that, believe it or not, Matt, I appreciate that because it allows me to disabuse them of that notion. It allows me to enlighten them. Let me give you a quick example. I represent a lot of young black men who are accused of seriously violent offenses. And many in America, it's two choices for America: to look at my clients and say, they're thugs, they're genetically predisposed to crime, they're just bad people and all these bad ghettos throughout America. And then other folks, much more enlightened, would say, well, maybe there's some social implications. Look at Michael Coard. He's nothing special, but he's a lawyer and a college professor and a radio show host. How is he different from those quote unquote thugs? Well, I'm different, if that's the right word, because I got what the average white American got. I got a chance to go to a good school. For whatever reason, the system in Philadelphia takes me out of my North Philly school and puts me in Masterman, where I am with the white kids. And from Masterman, I'm on my way to college and law school and all that stuff. So what if my quote unquote thuggish clients had gotten that same opportunity? So when we look at black folks being at the bottom of every category, education, income, home ownership, all of that, again, it's either because they're genetically predisposed to be there or because of societal implications. And clearly, it's societal implications because there's no white person today in America in 2020 who would voluntarily change their ancestors' history in America for my ancestors' history in America. Go back 50 years. Would you change your grandparents' experience in America with my grandparents? Go back 100 years, go back 200 years. So all of that time, those white folks are creating generational wealth. All those white folks are getting to go to good schools. They're getting good jobs while mine are being held back. So you can't just look at the lesion and say, hey, that's an ugly, horrible sore. You got to look at the cancer that caused the lesion.
You have been critical for many years about police brutality, police-involved killings. We see campaign commercials nowadays during this presidential campaign season that warn of a society where there are no police, there is no law, there is no order, there are no rules. properties are burning. Families are scared for their safety. Michael, when do calls for reform of the police department go too far?
They go too far when people misunderstand what the defund the police movement is all about. They think that the folks who advocate defunding the police, folks like me, are saying, fire every cop and just let anarchy reign. No reasonable person is saying that. We all have children and grandchildren that need to be protected. We all have parents and grandparents that need to be protected. So clearly somebody has to protect them. But what we don't want in terms of that protection is the fruit of the poisonous tree. And what I mean by that is people will be shocked to know that America's municipal police departments today in 2020 came out of the slave patrols in 1704 in the colony of Carolina. Before Carolina, North or South, became a state in 1704, they were the first to deputize white men aged 21 years old and older to monitor and keep down the so-called slave population. That began the police patrols in America today. So we're not talking about defunding the police in terms of protecting society. I think a better phrase is defang the police. For one thing, since the 1990s, police departments across the country have gotten $7 billion, that's billion with the B, $7 billion in military equipment. What police department needs rocket launchers and grenade launchers and tanks? What police department is justified in killing more unarmed black people between 2015 and 2016 than the number of black people who were lynched in the late 1880s? Let me repeat that. Between 2015 and 2016, more unarmed black people were killed by cops than were lynched by mobs in the late 1880s. So when we say defund the police, we're talking about ending what came out of the colony of Carolina in 1704. We're talking about the wholesale assault on black people. So clearly, defund the police is not an attempt to allow anarchy to reign. It's in fact designed to stop police anarchy from going unchecked and unaccounted for. That's all it is.
Have a couple of minutes left, Michael. Back when there were about 20 or so candidates running for president on the Democratic side, they were talking about possibly having reparations for African Americans who are the descendants of slaves. And there are a lot of people that have warmed up to the idea that, yes, there are some problems in this society and we really need to start addressing them, but the reparations is a bridge too far. What problems would the reparations solve, and what danger would this be of dividing us further?
I got to tell you, Matt, I really love your probing questions because you force me to think and give me an opportunity to talk to the public. Let me spend 2 quick minutes responding to that. First of all, reparations for me and for many reparations activists is not about money. There's no way in the world that in August of 1619, when my ancestors in Angola were captured by Europeans and some of them were brought to Virginia, it's no way that 401 years ago, my ancestors said, you can kidnap me, you can enslave me, you can rape me, you can lynch me. But after 401 years, just give me $1,000 or give me 10,000, give me 100,000, give me $1 million. You took my land, took my freedom, took my language, took my culture, but just pay me some money 400 years from now. No, that's not what we're talking about. So reparations is not about money. Reparations is about repairing, putting black people where they would have been had there been no slavery, had there been no sharecropping, had there been no Jim Crow. It's all about repairing. And very quickly, here's the analogy. As a lawyer, I understand a concept called unjust enrichment. So in 30 seconds, let me explain this. Here I am, Michael Coard, walking down Broad Street near Walnut. I see a white guy with a nice watch on. And I say to the white guy, hey, that's a really nice watch. And he says, yes, sir, it is. Would you like to see it? I say, yes. He shows me his watch. As I look at the back of it, Matt, it says, property of Michael Coard the First, 1776. And I said to the white guy, where'd you get this watch from? He said, I got it from my father. Where'd he get it from? He got it from his father. And as we sit there and talk, Matt, we find out that in 1776, his great-great-great-grandfather stole my great-great-grandfather's watch. Now, the white guy I'm talking to in 2020, he didn't steal it. The watch didn't belong to me, Michael Coard, in 2020, but based on the concept of unjust enrichment, that white guy got to repair that wrong by giving up that watch, and not giving it to me, but giving up to the system so that we have better education, employment opportunities, business startups. In other words, put us back where we would have been, repair the wrong that America did.
A true radio pro counts himself down to the end of the program. That's Michael Coard for you. Michael, thanks so much for joining us here on Inside Story.
And thanks again, Matt, for your probing questions and the great work you do at 6 ABC Inside Story.
And listen to our conversation on the True Philadelphia podcast. It's available right now. That's Inside Story for this week. I'm Matt O'Donnell. Enjoy your Sunday, everyone, and thanks for listening.